If you've listened to Brewlosophy at all, you know how much we love Imperial Yeast. The company was founded on the ideal that if you're going to do something, do it right. From their Imperial Pitch-Right pouches, packing a whopping 200 billion cells of healthy and viable yeast in each pouch, to their commitment to commercial customers, guaranteeing 10 of their most popular strains are in stock for orders up to 20 liters, or the shipping is free, Imperial Yeast does it right. No more worrying about whether you need to make a starter or propagate your yeast prior to pitching. Imperial Yeast makes it easy for the home brewer and commercial brewer to obtain direct pitches at proper rates when you need it. To place a commercial order or to get more information about everything that Imperial Yeast has to offer, head on over to imperialyeast.com. Welcome to the Brew Lab. Folks love their vices, be it alcohol, tobacco, or more recently, cannabis, the psychoactive, distantly related cousin of hops. With cannabis rapidly becoming legalized across the country, I suppose it was only a matter of time before folks started trying to combine cannabis and beer. I'm your host, Cade Job, and today in the lab I'm speaking with Ryan Bremser, the Beverage Production Manager at Veterans Holdings, Inc., a cannabis company in Fulton County, New York. And yes, you heard that right, a Beverage Production Manager at a cannabis company. And of course, while hops are a cousin of cannabis, it's difficult to use them in the same manner. Cannabis, of course, is prized for THC, which is the psychoactive component, while hops are used for bitterness and aromatic properties. There's no psychoactive component of hops. Cannabis also come with an interesting array of aromas and flavors, which really haven't been explored to a great extent in the commercial marketplace, at least in terms of beverage production, probably because cannabis is still illegal at the federal level in the United States. And even if it were legalized, it would still be a controlled substance regulated by the TTB, the Tax and Trade Bureau. But let's say that you're in a state where cannabis is legal, or you're a home brewer interested in some personal consumption. How do you get THC into beer? Turns out it's a little tricky, but we're brewers. We can do this. And of course, someone has thought of it. Ryan has plenty of experience on this topic, and he's going to talk to us today about making emulsions to get THC into beer. Yeah, it turns out it's a little bit tricky to get THC into beer, but you can do it. Ryan knows how, and he's going to provide those details today. But first, if you haven't yet signed up to become a patron, please consider doing so. By becoming a patron of Brewlosophy, you get awesome rewards like access to Brewlosophy contributor recipes that we've never published, new discounts each month to YakimaValleyHops.com, and for $3 a month, access to a monthly live Q&A session with a special guest from the brewing industry. Becoming a patron is so easy. Once you've contributed at that $3 level or higher, you get access to the private Patreon Facebook page where all of the previous Q&A sessions are available to watch. It's guests like Vinny Chilurzo, John Palmer, and the Brewlosopher himself, Marshall Schott. There are so many more. All the information that you need to get access to this awesome resource is available at patreon.com/Brewlosophy, so go check it out. And thank you to everyone that's left a rating or review of the show. We're over 100 ratings on Apple Podcasts, which is awesome. And if you haven't yet left a rating or review on your podcast service of choice, I'd really appreciate it. Take a second, let us know what you think of the show, and help other people like you find this show. Feedback this week is from listener Manuel, who says, "Hi, Cade. Hope you're doing well. I've been listening to Brewlab Brewlosophy episodes on a case-by-case basis for a few years, and unsurprisingly, I'm an occasional homebrewer, winemaker, cider maker, and all-around fermentationist, conveniently with a microbiology degree. I've got to say that one of my favorite episodes so far is episode 82 with Jonah Greenbaum Schinder, about using koji to upcycle brewery waste streams. It really shows creativity with cross-domain fermentations, and I've listened to the episode probably 10 times since it came out and still get excited by it. In the episode and on Jonah's poster, about 90% is covering the spent grain waste stream. What I was wondering about is if there's any more information around about the yeast garum besides the Noma Guide and Koji Alchemy. If so, would you mind pointing me in the right direction? Thank you, Manu." So Manu, thanks for the question. You're of course referring to that poster that's from an MBAA conference back in 2022. And yes, it does talk about mixing spent yeast with koji rice and salt to make a brewer's spent yeast garum. There's not a lot of information on that poster, but sort of in talking with Jonah and Richard Priest from Escarpment Labs about it, Yeah, there's a couple of things that you can do to sort of improve your yeast garum. The first one, of course, is if you're harvesting yeast, don't harvest it from a batch that's had either a whirlpool edition or a dry hop edition, because there could be like hop particulate and things like that make it in, and that might interfere with or provide conflicting flavors to your yeast garum. So that's one tip. And also, of course, as you see on the poster, choosing your yeast strain is also a big deal. They saw that Hornindal Kvike was the best at producing glutamic acid, which of course is that umami flavor that you're looking for. And that's, of course, all on the poster, which you have access to. In terms of the amounts of each ingredient, I'm going to reach out to Richard and see if he can give us a recipe. But I would start by combining salt, spent yeast, and a fresh pitch of Hornindal and see what happens. Of course, this is pretty cool because you can split this stuff up into multiple fermentations, right? You can do each time that you've got some spent yeast, you can throw a different yeast on top of it, and some salt and koji rice, and see what happens and see what flavors you get. One of my favorite things about fermentation, and I'm sure yours too, Manu, since you consider yourself an all-around fermentationist, is even if I have a recipe from somebody else, it never really goes according to the recipe, and there's something just fun about kind of playing around with these ingredients. Of course, I will let you know what I hear back from Richard. And of course, I would ask you too, Manu, if you try this yourself, please let me know what you think. So yes, I'll be back in touch with more information. All right, after this break, I'll be back talking about making beers with THC with Ryan Bremser. The dry yeast revolution is here, and Cellar Science is leading the charge. Cellar Science has expanded the world of dry yeast far beyond the drab landscape of yesteryear. With over 20 strains of beer and wine yeast now available, you can brew any style. Not to mention that their unique growth and harvesting process greatly increases lipid levels in yeast cell walls, removing the need to aerate your wort on the first pitch and allowing you to directly pitch without rehydration. Couple that with the other advantages of dry yeast, such as higher cell count and viability, and you can clearly see why commercial breweries across the U.S. are using dry yeast and choosing Cellar Science. Over my years of brewing, I've heard of some wacky ingredients to use in beer like donuts, clams, pizza, and even pickles. So brewing with cannabis, a distant but related cousin of hops, doesn't really seem all that strange anymore. With cannabis becoming legalized across the United States, brewers have started wondering, if someone were to hypothetically use cannabis in a beer, how would they do it? Well, my guest today in the lab is Ryan Bremser, the Beverage Production Manager at Veterans Holding Inc., a cannabis company in Fulton County, New York. Ryan, welcome to the Brew Lab.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. I'm happy to have you here. But wait a minute. You're a beverage production manager at a cannabis dispensary. Tell me about that role.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're actually not a dispensary. What we are is a processing company. So in how, each state has their different laws. We don't have federal regulations yet. But in New York, they have divided up the manufacturing part of cannabis into cultivators, processors, and then dispensaries. Dispensaries obviously sell the products. We take in biomass or the cannabis flower, and then we either extract it or process it in a way that produces other products like pre-rolls or distillate, those sorts of things.
I see. Nice. Okay, so that makes sense. I think actually, as I think about this, and you're going to understand as we go through this how very limited my information is about the cannabis industry. But that makes sense. I think it's the same here in Oregon where I'm at, where there's like a grower and then a processor and then the dispensary or the retailer that actually sells it to the public. So you are then the processor. Okay, and so I guess that makes sense. But still, it's a cannabis company. Why does a cannabis company, a cannabis processor, need a beverage production manager?
Yeah, so one of the things that we produce are beverages. We think that they're a part of the market in New York that has some growth in there. We think that people want to drink beverages. They want to still get the buzz. A lot of it is like people are kind of going towards a non-alc side, but they still want to get tipsy. They still want to have some of that feelings, but they don't want the hangover.
Yeah.
And that's like the big one of the big selling points of beverage is that you can still ingest this product without smoking. And usually the onset times are a little faster than with traditional edibles. It's more social. Eating a gummy at a party is not a social interaction. Whereas like having a beverage, there's a long tradition of being in a gathering and ingesting libations.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. That makes sense to me. And I certainly can see that, right? This is a beer and brewing focused podcast, but one of the reasons why we're able to do this is because people love to sit and drink together. And that's right? Like eating a gummy is like one gummy, right? And then you're done. But a beverage lasts for a while. There's social situations. That's cool. Well, I'm excited to talk to you then about how to make beverages with cannabis. But first, I want to just sort of introduce you a little bit. So you're formerly the head distiller at Killington Distillery in Vermont, and before that, quality manager at Paradox Brewery in North Hudson, New York. So how did you find your way into beverage production and even more specifically into cannabis beverage production?
Yeah, absolutely. I started actually brewing kombucha, at home, and then I went commercial with it. After that, I was really interested in just the production side and the production side and the kind of the innovation that was happening in beer and just beverages in general. And I had the opportunity to come on board at Paradox. And while I was there, we were having an issue with haze stability in our New England IPAs. And that kind of led me into cannabis emulsions because what I was doing at the time is we were kind of playing with some hop extracts, and we noticed that when we would dissolve it in ethanol and then introduce it into the beer, it would create a haze essentially. And by doing that, we were it led us to the thing is like, well, if we're what is this phenomenon? You look at it, and we did some Googling, and it's the ouzo effect. It's basically a spontaneous emulsification of the oils, and that led us to the question is like, okay, if this spontaneous emulsion can occur by this process, is that a potential source of haze and haze stability in New England IPAs? So once we kind of had that idea, me and another coworker, he was able to reach out to Anton Parr, and we were able to work with Anton Parr's particle division, and we set up a bunch of tests in order to determine the parameters of just stability in beer in regards to hop oils, as well as some other things in that. So we looked at hop oil concentration. So how much hop oil, when does it start to tip to an unstable point in the beverage? We looked at pH, what that affects. And a lot of this stuff, it was like replicating what was already in the literature at the time. And hop oil, we looked at yeast strains. So different yeast strains, what we found would create more or less stable haze. So we had an issue with haze, not only keeping haze in our IPAs, but also keeping our Pilsners clear. And so keeping the haze out of those. Yeah. And what we found is we tested a Lallemand Augustiner yeast, the dry yeast, with BSIs, liquid yeast. And we found that the Lallemand created a stable haze, and BSI did not. Huh. So that was interesting. One of the points of it was what yeast, what factors affected this haze, and yeast was one of them. I think that literature has been out. It has kind of come out and found that different yeasts like Kveik yeast produce haze. So that was really interesting. and we also found we started to just kind of look at haze and beer as an emulsion, and how is it that we create an emulsion in the beer that creates like stability. So another thing we introduced was step mashing. If you do a protein rest, we added that to it. Obviously, there's, when you start to change your processes, it affects the final beer. So you have to take that into consideration. But we were able to reduce haze in our pilsners and increase haze stability in our IPAs by just changing even like ion concentration. So, less brewing salts, for example, was another way. But again, as that changes the beer. So it's kind of just figuring out what levers you can pull and which ones you want to, and which ones don't have as much effect on the final product.
So that was like your initial foray into like these making emulsions, I guess, right? Like making getting like a stable haze into beer. So like, from a beer related perspective, right? You're not even at this point looking at cannabis yet, right? I mean, you're just looking at hops and like how to get hop characteristics into the beer in a stable format.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then how'd you transition over into cannabis?
Yeah, it was just I was seeing how the market in New York, they were at the time they were talking about opening up legalization for cannabis in New York, and I thought that would be super interesting to do as like it's a product that beer has a whole history of brewing and techniques, whereas cannabis beverage is a wide open field that no one has really done throughout the history. So that was really intriguing, and I liked the science behind emulsions, and I learned a lot in that process, so I could apply that very easily to making my own emulsions at home for cannabis or hop.
And I guess it's like you said, like hop oils are a huge component of what we want from hops in beer. And I've often heard, I guess, that cannabis is related to hops, or it's like, a distant cousin, but it's a cousin. It's in the family tree. And so I guess it sort of makes sense then. Cannabis would likely have oils and might, react the same way to hops.
Absolutely, yes. They have many of the same terpenes and profiles. Obviously, cannabis has THC, which is the psychoactive ingredient in cannabis. So there are a lot of similarities in that respect, for sure.
Yeah, and okay, and so I'm starting to see here. I'm seeing you like, okay, looking for where can we go with this product category. And all right, I've been making these emulsions to try to get haze stable in beer. What if I try to start making emulsions in cannabis and making cannabis related beers? That sounds pretty cool. Now, you mentioned THC. So THC is the psychoactive chemical in cannabis, and hops are not psychoactive. And so I guess I'm not going to ask you to explain like what it's like to get high on cannabis, but I think about like alcohol and beer and the reasons why we drink beer. And part of that is its cognitive impact. Part of the reason why people smoke or ingest cannabis is the cognitive impact from THC. Are we talking about getting like a similar kind of buzz when we're using cannabis to infuse beverages like beer? Is that what sort of one of the goals is of putting cannabis in a beverage?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, the effects are a little different with cannabis than alcohol, but ultimately, yes, it's similar. There is a difference between smoking cannabis and ingesting it. The effects are a little delayed when you're ingesting it, as opposed to smoking it, and the actual experience is a bit different as well. So there's some difference there, but I think the main thing with beer and cannabis beverages is that you get similar, not exact effects, but a lot of it is you don't get the hangover as well. You might feel a little groggy in the morning when you're ingesting cannabis, but you're not going to have the splitting, migraine, headaches, and all those negative effects when you overindulge.
Right. Exactly. Oh, that's really interesting. And so I guess, are there other reasons why people might want to put cannabis in a beverage? I mean, do people, this is, again, I'm not a regular cannabis user. Do people use cannabis because they like the flavor? They like the way it tastes and they want to have that in a beverage?
Absolutely. I think some people do. I think those, I think there's different segments. Some people want it to taste neutral, like nothing, and you can produce that by using different extracts. But others, like myself, like the flavor of cannabis. I used to smoke a lot, and I liked flower. And part of the things I liked about flower was the terpene profile, was the smell, the aroma, the taste. But as you get older, you don't want to smoke necessarily. If you have children, you want to run around. It does take a toll on you. Whereas if you start to ingest it, you're able to get those same benefits without the damage to your lungs. And by adding terpenes in with it, or keeping the terpenes in, you can have a beverage that tastes nearly identical to the flower, which is really exciting for some people.
And, that's really cool. That's kind of exciting for me too. I kind of want to try it now. And because I think about like hops, right? I mean, hops are added into beer to do that, right? They're added for flavor. They were originally added for just bitterness, right? Not for the purpose that they're used now. But now they're added for all these different flavors. And I think about all the different varieties of hops. And one of the questions I have like off the top is, are there like different varieties of cannabis that like taste and smell different? People are probably like nodding their head and laughing at me going, yes, of course, Cade, there are, but are there?
Absolutely. There's more different phenotypes out there than I can even say. And they come out every other day because there's a lot of crossbreeding. There's a lot of that same with hops. You have so many different varietals in hops. You have so many different types of cannabis. And I think the unique thing about cannabis that's a little different than alcohol, if each of those strains, like because of their like terpene profile and their cannabinoid profile, they'll give you different highs. You can have more of a sedentary effect where, if you could call it like couch block, where you don't want to get out of the couch, and then you can have more uplifting, more energetic cannabis that will get you to kind of move and be more active. Whereas, alcohol, it seems like it's just a matter of degrees, right?
Yeah. How much do you imbibe, right? Yeah. Like whether you want to get up off the couch or not. Yeah, exactly. That's interesting. But so there's actually could be a different quality aspect of the high. And meaning like, in terms of the beverage, there could be a totally different quality of the beverage itself, of the buzz that you get from the beverage, depending on the strain or phenotype of cannabis that you're using. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And also adding other functional ingredients can also affect with that, like caffeine or grapefruit juice, for example.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah. Because, okay, I want to ask more about that too, but that also sort of gets me on this question too, that I feel like we have to talk about here. If we're talking about, I'm talking about like mixing different functional ingredients, right? Like, so THC is a functional ingredient in cannabis. Alcohol is a functional ingredient in beer. Both of those things are federally regulated. Well, THC is, I guess, cannabis is federally prohibited. It's legal in a bunch of states, but alcohol is also regulated by the federal government. If you combine these two things together, is that even legal? Can you do that in the U.S.?
No, not at this time. I definitely not. The TTB is not going to allow you to put anything that even closely resembles cannabis in a product and then sell it. I mean, in your home, you can pretty much do what you'd like. I would definitely look at your state and local regulations for what is allowed. But yeah, I don't see that necessarily coming down the pipe. I think there's a lot of people who do mix, but you can run into issues with that. Is over, getting over your skis, so to speak, and not feeling well. I think one of the issues they worry about is THC tends to suppress nausea. So, and that's kind of when you consume too much alcohol, that's like your body, kind of trying to help you out.
Yeah,
and if you
exactly.
suppress that, you can run into some issues.
I see. Yeah. So combining those things together might actually not be great for our health in general. But that's a good point, right? And the key here too is even if you're doing this at home, like be aware of your legal restrictions in your local state. But if you're not mixing the two, if you're just making a cannabis beverage, I mean, it's likely that if it's legal in your state, then you're going to be able to make these types of beverages. But what I'm starting to hear too that there are a lot of choices that are going to go into making a cannabis infused style beer, right? You were talking about different strain. You mentioned different functional ingredients like adding caffeine or grapefruit juice. I'm guessing there's other fruit juices and things. What sorts of decisions are you having to make like at the outset? Let's say you want to make a beverage with cannabis. What sorts of things are you having to figure out at the beginning to determine what beverage you want to make?
Yeah, I think is like almost the setting on which you want to use it. If you're looking for something that's going to be more of a social lubricant, so to speak, then you're going to want to select a strain of extract that is maybe more uplifting, that has more energy, associated with it versus like something that has more of the sedentary effects. If you want to just stay at home and watch a movie, then maybe, that might be a different realm of extract that you're going to go for, versus, wanting to spend time with other people.
Yeah. And so, and like, okay, so the social setting is a really important here. And I think about, like you mentioned earlier, sort of like non-alcoholic beers. And I think those are becoming really important in social settings, but there's an opportunity here if, for you to make a beer related beverage without alcohol by using a non-alcoholic beer and then adding cannabis to it, or, using cannabis as an ingredient and making some sort of, like a cannabis beer. Is that a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. There are some in New York. We don't have any currently, but in California, I believe that there are some who make de-alcoholized beer, and then infuse it with THC. I think right now that's less likely just because of the amount of infrastructure you need.
Yeah.
In order, you need so much just to make the beer, de-alcoholized, then have the second step of infusing it. It makes it, at a commercial scale, it makes it very, difficult to get a product at a price point that is going to move off the shelves at that rate. But, if you did some of those high temp mashings, like at home, if you're doing a home brewer, if you're playing with de-alcoholized beer, or you even just buying a 6-pack of your favorite de-alcoholized beer, in many of the states, like in Vermont, New York, and Massachusetts, you can go to the dispensary and buy a pre-made emulsion, a flavorless emulsion, and then incorporate that into your now non-alcoholic beverage of choice, which makes it very versatile.
So could you incorporate that emulsion into any beverage, like whatever beverage you wanted to put it in?
Absolutely, for sure. Some emulsions might not be as stable in an alcoholic environment at certain ABVs. They start to fall apart. They start to become unstable. But if you're just introducing it to your beer and then consuming it immediately, that won't really affect it.
Yeah. So are there like different styles then of beverages that y'all are playing around with? Like what are some examples of like, a cannabis style beverage that you might design or that people might want to drink?
Yeah, for sure. So there's like low dose cannabis beverage, and that's going to be like between 2 and 5 milligrams of THC, and then generally some amount of CBD in there. And then you'll have ones that are going to be like 10 milligrams or higher, depending on the state. Each state has different regulations, and some won't let you do more than 10, some won't let you do more than 5, some will let you do 100 milligrams in a drink. But when you're designing those products, the more milligrams you have in it, the more bitter it's going to be. So you're going to have to take that into account. And a lot of high milligram beverages in cannabis are going to have a lot of sugar. They're going to have like bitter blockers in there to try to mitigate that really intense bitterness. And that kind of plays with beer too, because if you take a beer that's already really bitter and then you add THC to it, it's going to be even more bitter. As well as CBD tends to be perceived as more bitter than THC. So if you're adding both of those things in certain ratios, because the ratio of THC to CBD will affect the high essentially, and the onset time as well. So like the more CBD you get into the product, you have to mitigate that bitterness in different ways. You can do it with sugar or pH, like dropping the pH low will affect bitterness. You'll have less perceived bitterness in that. And then you can also manipulate, depending on how well your process is, if you could even manipulate the particle size of the CBD or the THC. Generally the smaller particle size you go, the more bitter it's going to be, as well as carrier oils. If you're using a carrier oil in it, you can also manipulate bitterness with that.
And do you see those levels, like that bitterness level, changing with like the strain or the phenotype of cannabis? Like does that stuff change depending on what you're using as your original base for the emulsion?
Not so much the different phenotypes, more about just different cannabinoids. From CBD to THC, you'll see that, and then concentration wise.
I see. Well, what about flavor? Does the flavor of the emulsion change depending on the strain that you're using, or the
absolutely?
Phenotype? Okay.
Yeah. So you can go. When you go to make an emulsion, you have choices between what sort of THC you're going to use, like how extractable, what type of process. So you can get an isolate that will be like 99% pure THC, versus like a distillate that might be around 90% So that percentage, they'll have other cannabinoids and other terpenes in there, depending on what you choose. And then you can also, you have like isolate, distillate, and then you can go into more boutique ones that are going to be like rosins, which, they might have, anywhere from 30 to 70% THC. So that percentage will kind of dictate what else is kind of carried along that didn't get taken out in the process. So depending on which extract you use, you will definitely get different profiles. So when you're, say, designing a beverage, you want to not only have the end user, if you're doing it commercially, what's your end user, right? Like, what are they going to use it for? Where are they going to use it for? Or when are they going to use it for? But also, like, how much of it do you want to taste like cannabis? You can make a product, like I said before, that you couldn't even tell that cannabis was in it. It would be so neutral. Or you could have a product that tastes like you're drinking the flower. It's all on who you're going for and what you want out of the beverage. Out of the beverage.
That's cool. I want to talk processes here in just a minute, and we'll do that whenever we come back from the break. But before we do that, I wanted to talk also about the base beverage that you're putting cannabis products into. Are we talking like seltzers? Are we talking like cola? Are we talking beer? Just like fizzy water? Like, what are we talking about in terms of base, or is the world your oyster?
The world's your oyster. You can do everything and anything. I've done a bunch of different things, from RTD inspired sours to seltzers. From like neutral seltzers that just either like a spindrift sort of deal. I've done what's really nice. What I like a lot is like a hop lark, where you have the tea and the hops, and then you add some like some of the more unrefined cannabis oils, like a rosin, where you have some of those terpenes, you get the skunkiness, you get some of the herbaceousness from the tea and the hops. It just really, really tastes fantastic.
That's so cool to think about. Like all these different, you're opening my world to a new ingredient here, which is really exciting for me. I'm really curious to see what is the interplay between these ingredients. But all right, let's take a quick break. And when we do, we'll come back talking about process for getting cannabis into a beverage. And then let's also get some ideas from Ryan about what he thinks makes a good or bad cannabis beverage. So we'll be right back. One of the biggest improvements to my brewing practices was the upgrade to stainless steel, and Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on high-quality stainless gear, like the Firm Tank, which holds 8 gallons or 30 liters of wort, comes with a domed lid to reduce the chances of a messy blow-off, and it can hold up to 4 psi of pressure. Delta Brewing Systems also has their own line of brew kettles, as well as one of the lowest-priced all-in-one electric brew systems out there, and their prices are remarkably affordable. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, you've got to check out deltabrewingsystems.com. We all know that designing recipes is really fun, and doing it well is so much easier with good software. We at Brewlosophy recently made the switch to Brewfather, and honestly, y'all, we could not be happier. Brewfather utilizes the latest technology to bring you the most robust cloud-based recipe design software that can be accessed anywhere, on your phone, tablet, desktop, and even offline. It also works seamlessly with numerous third-party devices to make it easier to monitor every step of your brew. I know change can be difficult, but trust me when I say you need to go to brewfather.app today to try it out for yourself. That's brewfather.app. When I try to serve beer to non-beer drinkers, they often say, yeah, it smells like beer, or it smells like hops. Most people aren't really in tune with the nuanced flavors and aromas of hops and beer like the people who listen to this podcast. But Ryan, I'm curious, do you think that there are cannabis users out there who make choices about which cannabis to buy or which product to use or how to infuse it into beverage based on the nuances that like we see in beer? Or are there a segment of consumers out there that are like, yeah, it smells like weed?
Yeah, I absolutely. I definitely think there's people who buy, especially in the flower market, you're going to be buying on a lot of like sensory inputs. So smell, look is a big, visual appearance, like how it's trimmed, how sugary it looks, that sort of thing. And then there's also a segment of population that isn't that into it, where they just want a neutral product that they're just going to consume, in the way that they do. But I think there's people who want that and people who don't. So there's a whole gambit there.
Yeah. Well, that certainly has some opportunity for y'all then as a processor of this, coming up with new beverages and for you, right, in your role, making beverages where cannabis is infused. You've got, like you said, options of the gamut from like neutral, like non-cannabis tasting beverages to fully, this tastes like a flower kind of beverage. And so I'm curious then, how do you get the cannabis into these beverages? What are the different like processes or techniques? How do you do this? And I'm curious about this from a homebrew all the way up to a commercial scale on how you might do that.
Yeah. So on the commercial scale, you can, it's going to be an emulsion. And on the homebrew scale, it'll be emulsion. There's other technologies at the commercial scale that people have developed and are using. I think if you're in the commercial space, you'd probably be working with another processor or someone who specializes in emulsions. There's a couple companies out there that are pretty prominent in that sector, and they have multiple different formulations, and they've been in it and doing it for a while. So a lot of the products that are out there on the shelves in the dispensaries would be using, partnering with one of them. On the homebrew scale, there's a lot of options as far as how to make them. The most simple way is just like we described at the beginning, would be just to get a extract. So you'd purchase that from a dispensary, and and then you could just dissolve it in some ethanol, and then just take a little bit of it and put it into your beer or whatever beverage, and it will create a spontaneous emulsification. That would work, if you're going to ingest it immediately. If you want something that's longer or has a longer shelf life, say you're going to make a keg of the stuff, then you'd probably want to do some other process to it, which wouldn't involve alcohol. The basic process is an emulsion process where you would take a surfactant, which is a chemical that has a hydrophilic and a hydrophobic tail. And what you would introduce that generally into the water. You would dissolve it in there. So you could use like sunflower lecithin. You could use, there's a whole bunch of different natural ingredients that you could use with that. Then you would take your cannabis oil, whatever variety you like. And usually you would dilute it down with a carrier oil. So you could use anything that you wanted. It could be canola oil. It could be hemp seed oil. Generally, it's MCT oil because it's neutral and it has, its density is very similar to water. So that's part of the reason you want to add a carrier oil to your cannabis extract is it brings that oil's density down closer to water's density, and that reduces the interfacial tension between the droplet you're going to produce, the little spherical, emulsion unit of THC, closer to the density of oil, so that then it becomes more stable in the fluid, in the water, or whatever other product you're putting it into. So once you've done that, usually you have to heat it a little bit to kind of get it to incorporate into the MCT oil. Once you do that, then you would introduce it into your water and surfactant. So I usually do about 50 milliliters. I'm just, at a homebrew scale, just testing things out, small scale. Then you would add shear to it. So you could do that as simply as like a blender would work. It's hard to do a very small volume like that in a blender. But you could also just get like a Cade or something. It's like it's just a piece of equipment that creates, that vibrates at a very high frequency and will create cavitation, breaking up the oil into smaller particulates, and then the surfactant will coat the droplet and make it stable over time, stable in the water.
In the beverage, in the water. Okay, and so I can kind of see the science behind this too, right? You were mentioning earlier the science behind what you were doing there at Paradox for haze, right? So you've got an oil and you need some sort of carrier oil to get that into a form that then can react with the surfactant that will create an emulsion between the water and the oil, and then that emulsion is what you can put then into your beverage, say for example beer or a keg of whatever that is that you're trying to make. That's kind of like the scientific process of how that works, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And then, so let's break that down into like a little bit of detail. So like, let's say you're doing this at the homebrew scale, like a 50 milliliter scale, like what amount of oil or like cannabis product are you adding to an amount of like MCT or medium, MCT oil? What amounts are you adding? Are you just doing like a drop of the THC product? Or are you doing like I don't know what sizes those oils and extracts come in, but like how much are you using?
Yeah. Usually, you could do a half a gram to a gram.
Okay.
At that scale. It really depends on the extract. So like maybe an isolate or a distillate, you don't need as much carrier oil. It will dissolve really easily. You might do a 1-to-1 ratio with that. Or if you're doing, say, a rosin that has a bit more like lipids, fats, and other like compounds in there, it isn't as refined. Then you're going to need like a 3-to-1. So 3 grams of MCT oil to 1 gram of your rosin, and then heat it. And you have to heat it for a bit to really get it to incorporate all those things. and then you would generally, then I would just weigh out about 40 grams of water, and then add, depending on your surfactant, that's where a lot of the trial and the creativity comes in. It's like, what combination of surfactants am I going to use? Sometimes they work better, in tandem, and then like how much of it. So one I would do like 3 grams of the surfactant in this case. So it'd be like 40 grams of water, 3 grams of surfactant, and then your 4 grams of MCT and extract.
And extract.
Then,
yeah.
Yep, and then you're going to want to heat it. Generally during the process, it's going to create heat. That shear is going to create heat. So you could put it into a bowl with some ice, just to keep so the temperature doesn't get really hot in there. So just trying to keep it stable.
I see. Okay, because the emulsion itself is going to create some heat, the surfactant and stuff as it's shearing. As you're shearing those oil droplets into small particles, that's going to create heat. Yeah, like in a blender or sonicator or whatever it is that you're using to do that.
Yeah. You can sonicator. There's a little handheld like tissue tear sort of units that aren't as robust, but they're a little cheaper. You could even do it in a sonicating bath. Like if you had like jewelry, those ones that clean jewelry have sonication. I've heard of people using those to do a basic emulsion in that. You probably would want to use more you probably want to use more surfactant in those cases, where if you're not getting that high level of shear, more surfactant could help you to kind of make it a bit stabler and a finer particle. But yeah, then once you're doing that, you sonicate for a certain amount of time, 15, 20, 30 minutes, depending on whatever process you're doing. And a lot of that's going to just trial and error, kind of working out your equipment, just like when you're brewing is just knowing your equipment and knowing what it's capable of, and just trying different things.
Yeah. And so what does it look like whenever it is finally in that emulsion? Like does it look like milky? Does it look like white? Does it look like, I don't know, does it look yellow? Or what does it look like once it's like formed an emulsion?
Yeah, it's usually it's going to be white. Some of the surfactants will turn it different colors, like lecithin will kind of give it like a different tinge, like a brownish, beigeish tinge. And then, yeah, I mean, but basically it's going to look white and milky. And then you'd add it, then after you've sonicated that and you have your emulsion, you're going to want to put in some like preservatives, like a ascorbic acid and potassium sorbate, just to stabilize and the vitamin C is there for oxidation and obviously bringing that pH down so that mold won't grow. So you want to get it below a 4.6. Depending on the surfactant and your emulsion and what you're going to put it in, the pH will affect the stability of it. There's like sweet spots where if you drop it too low, it's going to destabilize it. If it's too high, also destabilize it. It all depends on your process and the ingredients that you're using.
Yeah, and you've said surfactant, but like if a home brewer is trying to look for surfactant at like a homebrew scale, or what would they look for? Is it like emulsifiers? Is that what they would try to find? Like you mentioned like sunflower lecithin. I think that's an ingredient that you can find relatively easy. But are there other examples of surfactant? I mean, is that the one that you use most often, the sunflower lecithin, or do you use something else?
I've used that before. I use a cornstarch product. There's also gum acacia, or acacia gum, I should say. That works as well. There's a bunch out there. There's another one that comes from like the bark of a tree. So there's a bunch out there. It's just finding the ones that you can get a handle on, and each of those are going to have a different like flavor to it. So lecithin to me tastes kind of nutty. Whereas like the cornstarch product that I use has like no taste or no bitterness, and some of the actual surfactants are bitter themselves. Like especially when you get into the synthetic realm, they can add bitterness and flavor. So your selection of that should be when you're looking at what kind of beverage you're going to make, it should be a factor as well.
Okay. And then on the temperature too, whenever you're heating this up at the beginning, like when you're using the extract and combining it with the MCT oil, you mentioned a little bit of heat there is nice. Are we talking about like, slightly above room temperature or like above body temperature? Or are we talking about like simmer, boil? Like how much heat are we talking about?
I would say around 70 C, 60, 70 C, it kind of, that sort of thing. I use like a water bath.
Okay. Yeah.
You can also use, a stir plate, if you have that equipment. But even just something as simple as, putting a bowl of water in the microwave and nuking it for, 2 or 3 minutes till it's almost boiling. And then putting it in a beaker, putting your MCT and your extract in a beaker, and then just putting that beaker in the water bath, heating it up, like that, like a double boiler kind of thing. But and just let it sit and swirl, sort of deal.
So it just gets it all nice and mixed up. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, cool. So then you've got your, let's say you've got your extract made. You've gone through those, or not your extract. Let's your emulsion. You've got your emulsion made. What do you do with it then? Where in the process would you add an emulsion, and how much do you add?
Yeah. So the amount that you're going to add is just going to be dependent on what your milligrams you want per drink. You would just do the math. So you would add up all your ingredients that you made in the emulsion, and then just calculate like, okay, then 1 milliliter should be 10 milligrams, for example.
Yeah.
And then so once like what you want the milligram per beverage to be, you can then you'd add it on the homebrew scale. You'd add it once you're done with mixing up the product. So say you made a beer and you're about to keg it, and you're going to put it into your kegerator. When you're racking to carbonate over into your keg, I would just either introduce it into the keg after it's sanitized, and then just rack on top of it, just to get it mixed up. If you're doing a lot of times if I'm going to have like a non-alcoholic beer or a seltzer or something, it's just popping the can of seltzer and then just dropping it in, to the dosage you want, and giving it a light swirl, and it will just go into solution and
just like
drinking.
A little eyedropper that you're just like eye-dropping, drops of it into like a regular beverage that you would drink. Oh, that's cool.
Yep. Yeah. You could do, if you have a keg, you could even, if you didn't even want to put it, like if you had like a low alcohol beer or any beer you wanted, you could just put it at the bottom of the pint glass when you go to pour it off, and just pouring it in will mix it up and give you that.
Ah, that's cool. Yeah, so it's super easy to use. Once you've got it in this, emulsification form, then you just dose it wherever you want to dose it, either in the finished package, in the keg, like wherever you want to put it in. But it sounds like you wouldn't really want to do it before any of like the hot side stuff. Like you wouldn't want to put it in like, the hot parts, the mash or the boil or anything. Like after fermentation, whenever you're like ready to go in your product, that's kind of when you'd want to add that emulsification.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I did forget to mention about the basic process is, depending on what extract you get, it may or may not be decarboxylated. So when you grow a plant, the cannabis plant produces THCA, the acid form. And so once it's extracted, depending on the processes that it's extracted, that THCA isn't psychoactive. It needs to be decarboxylated in order for it to turn into THC delta 9. So depending on the extract you get, if you're getting it from a dispensary, it will tell you whether or not it was THCA or THC. So whether it's been decarboxylated, if it's something like a rosin, you're going to have to decarboxylate that prior to the emulsion. And you just have to do that with heat. You can do it as simply as putting it in the oven, at a, say, 260 degrees for an amount of time for it to decarboxylate. That process can also be done slowly. Like if I want to retain the terpene profile and those flavors in it, I would do a water bath, say 70 to 80 C, for a couple days, and I would just let it decarboxylate over a longer period of time. Hope and to kind of preserve some of those more volatile compounds, right? Anything you can smell when you open a bag or you open a bag of hops, all that, it's volatile, right? And all those good flavors. So if you just put it into the oven, a lot of the volatiles will come off, and you'll have more of a neutral extract.
I see. So the water bath might be a better idea for preserving some of those flavors if that's what it is that you're looking for. Now, one other question that just popped into my head as I was thinking about this: are any of these instructions like written down someplace, or are there resources for people if they want to see something written or articles written about how to make emulsions and how to use those in beers? Has any of that been written down yet? I'd be kind of surprised if it has, but it certainly sounds like something that would be interesting to do, is to write down some sets of instructions or resources for people that want to make emulsions from cannabis products.
Yeah, there are some stuff like what I found is just like general, like how do you make an emulsion? There's all sorts of resources on the internet on just oil and water emulsion, processes. Like they'll go through, because you can get really nuanced, like the temperature when you're sonicating it. Let's say we're doing a sonication, the temperature you do that at can impact the emulsion formation. The amplitude of the horn can change it. So like there's a lot, like depending on your equipment, there's a lot of things you can dial in and really really optimize your process. Generally on a homebrew scale, we're not going to have that sort of granular control over it. Like the sonicator I use, I don't have that kind of control over it. It's a pretty basic one. But I'm not doing, at home, I'm not doing it for mass production.
Exactly.
So yeah. I don't need those sort of granular things. It's more of like I'm testing it. I'm trying different flavors. Like another way if you wanted to add more flavors, is there's a whole bunch of websites on that just sell terpenes, like that have like different profiles of like whatever strain you like. Even hop oil. I've emulsified hop oil and just put those in seltzers. Kind of like Lupalock. I think you did a program on that. Is a very, they're emulsifying it and then encapsulating it so that it can be packaged but it's like that same thing. They're using lecithin for that as well. You can do that at home, if you wanted.
Yeah, that's cool. That's fun to think about, right? Like all the different ways that you could use this product to flavor different beverages, like beers or non-alcs or whatever else that you wanted to brew. One thing also that just popped in my head too, we're talking about the emulsion and making an emulsion and using that to be able to get the cannabis infusion into beer. But could you not just dry hop the cannabis flower directly? Like, could you just put cannabis flower in a fermenter like you would with dry hops, or would that work?
Yeah, absolutely. It would not, because if you just took cannabis flower and put it in, you're not going to be really extracting all the THC, but also the THC is going to be in the acid form, which is non-psychoactive. So if your desire is just to get a cannabis flavor in your beer, you certainly could dry hop with it. I think I wouldn't use actual cannabis flower for that, because I think there's better uses for that. I would say I would probably go with a hemp. Like if you could source a really good quality hemp product, a flower that has a lot of terpenes, that smells really good, looks really good, then dry hopping with that would be something really interesting, because it would just essentially just be like hops. You're just trying to extract those terpenes from it, as well as maybe even doing like almost like a wet hop kind of thing, is if you were able to get something that was fresh like just caught that cut that day, or there's like processes in like they call it fresh frozen in cannabis, where you take cannabis flower right without it drying, freezing it, and then processing it in like near freezing temperatures to get all those flavors out of there that you would lose if you were to dry it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a good point about adding the cannabis flower directly to the fermenter, right? Because the key difference between cannabis and hemp is that, cannabis has THC and hemp doesn't, right? So if you're just going for flavor and aroma, hemp might be a better product. But for cannabis, you care about the THC. And so that's an important piece of getting that into the beverage. And so I'm kind of curious, as we sort of wrap up the show then, what are some things that you look for when you're looking for a good example of a cannabis beer?
Yeah. So what I would look for is basically the same stuff I would look for in a regular beer. Is mouthfeel, head retention. Is it true to style? Right. If it's saying it's an IPA, does it taste like an IPA? And how crushable it is.
Yeah.
How. Is it like, I don't particularly like West Coast because of the bitterness is a lot. I'd like more of the juicy kind of East Coast varieties of IPAs. A good Pilsner as well is on a nice summer day is great. I think the key is it what's advertised on the can, or if someone's handing me an IPA, does it taste like an IPA? Does it taste like a Pilsner? And that it's pretty, it's exactly the same as anything else. If it says on it, infused with terpenes, and you can't taste any terpenes, if it doesn't, then that I would say that's not a good example of it.
Yeah, for sure. I was just thinking, I want the light lager crushable version of a cannabis beverage, right? That's where those are the ones that I like to drink, right? Those nice crushable beers. And so and especially we were talking about at the beginning of this, like, how do you design a beverage to have cannabis infused in it? And you mentioned social situations, and so I think that is sort of a good way of thinking about a good example of a cannabis beverage is something that you would use in social situations, right? That's a great opportunity for people to make these beverages and get something that's new, novel, and drinkable.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, cool. So, all right. So what's next for, cannabis beverages? Is it just trying new ways to get this product into beverages, getting more things out on the market? What's next?
I think the big challenge for cannabis beverage is in many of the states, it's the dispensary model, where where these products can't be sold alongside of the traditional, like, you can't go to a convenience store or a grocery store and buy it right next to a Budweiser or a Coors, that sort of thing. You have to actually go to the dispensary. And I think a lot of the brands out there that are currently in the market are really catered towards that demographic, where they really need to be in mass circulation under traditional distribution models in order for them to really thrive. There are some states like Minnesota that are doing it. Texas, if it's hemp derived, can sell it alongside that. And in those states, THC infused beverages are doing very, very well. When you get to dispensary models, it becomes not as, there's more friction involved in that sort of transaction. So, but as far as like product development, I think there's a lot to do with more functional beverages, like THC beverages that are more geared towards a particular, either a particular outcome or a particular event or setting. I think there's a lot to do with there's a lot there that can be done.
Interesting. Yeah, that'd be fun. I mean, thinking about I like watching college football, so I'm thinking about like football THC beverages. I don't know how likely that is to happen anytime soon, but that's where beer and alcohol are consumed. Could a cannabis beverage be consumed in those same situations? That's something that would be interesting to pursue. Now, I always ask this question of my guests at the end of the show, and I was wanting to know from you, if you want brewers to take away just one thing from today's episode, what would it be?
I'd say that there's a to keep your eye on cannabis beverage. I think it's going to impact alcohol to some degree. I think especially with younger folks, they're skewing away from alcohol consumption, and I think as well as on a brewing point, there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of flavor and differentiation you can produce by using cannabis. Whether it's even just getting terpenes that are don't have any of the psychoactive compounds in it, and trying those as instead of using hop oil, maybe getting like an oil that is cannabis, has a particular cannabis strain or a particular flavor profile with that, and because you could do these as well, do an emulsion that doesn't have THC or CBD, and introduce that into your beer as well.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many options, right? I mean, again, I'm just scratching the surface of what I perceive as there's so many uses for cannabis and beer. You've got the THC component, but like you said, you've got pure THC down to resins. You can make beverages that taste like the flower, or just have the psychoactive component that are totally neutral. That would be just really interesting to explore. Mixing it with caffeine, mixing it with grape juice, fruits, all these other things. There's just so many things to explore with cannabis beverages. Well, this is really cool, Ryan. I mean, thank you for talking about this product and how we can make cannabis and get cannabis infused into beer, and how to make emulsions and all that sort of stuff. It's really incredible that this could be one of the next things that sort of starts to blow up in the future. At least it's something that is worthy of exploration and future study, right?
Absolutely. I think it is going to be a new wave in beverage for sure.
Well, cool. Well, I look forward to it, and thank you so much for joining me in the Brew Lab. And hopefully, in the future, once you've got some other, if you've got some products out there in the future that you want to talk about, I'd love to have you back.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. I appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, Ryan, for joining me in the Brew Lab.
Thank you.
All right. Well, next week, Jordan and I will be back applying the science of this episode, and we'll see y'all then. The Brew Lab is a production of Brewlosophy, where they who drink beer think beer. Don't forget to visit brewlosophy.com to read about our weekly experiments and other brewing adventures, and listen to us talk about it on our other show, the Brewlosophy Podcast. Thanks to all of our sponsors and patrons that help make this show possible. If you'd like to receive a reward for helping us do what we do, visit patreon.com/brewlosophy to see how you can do just that. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back in the Brew Lab with another guest next week. Until then, think beer.